Chapter 23, in which a terrible storm happens. On Sunday morning after breakfast, sailors have Gift's Steinway moved to the deck, and some folding chairs that were set in rows for church service. Fred, carrying his Bible, stood at the bulwark with Kozlov. Next to the Steinway was Kitty leaning against the wall. After the crew sang the opening hymn, Holy, 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 from the bulwark, Fred preached to them through the words of Luke chapter 5, verses 1 to 11. And it came to pass that as the people pressed upon him to hear the word of God, he stood by the lake of Gennesaret, and saw two ships standing by the lake, but the fishermen were gone out of them, and were washing their nets. And he entered into one of the ships, which was Simon's, and prayed him that he would thrust out a little from the land. And he sat down, and taught the people out of the ship. Now when he had left speaking, he said unto Simon, Launch out into the deep, and let down your nets for a draught. And Simon answering said unto him, Master, we have toiled all the night, and have taken nothing. Nevertheless, at thy word, I will let down the net. And when they had this done, they enclosed a great multitude of fishes, and their net brake. And they beckoned unto their partners, which were in the other ship, that they should come and help them. And they came, and filled both the ships, so that they began to sink. When Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord. For he was astonished, and all that were with him, at the draught of the fishes which they had taken. And so was also James and John, the sons of Zebedee, which were partners with Simon. And Jesus said unto Simon, Fear not, from henceforth thou shalt catch men. And when they had brought their ships to land, they forsook all, and followed him. Let us bow our heads. He bowed his head. The crew did the same. He went on. The Lord bless us and keep us. The Lord make his face to shine upon us, and be gracious unto us. The Lord lift up his countenance upon us, and give us peace now and forevermore, even after we return home. Amen. The crew rang out, Amen. He concludes, Let us sing, Eternal Father, strong to save. Soon after they sing, services were over, and the crew depart to their stations, putting away the folded chairs. You know, Kitty, Gift said to her, I was hoping you would join us tonight for a party on deck. Hopefully that cheers you up after so much heat on you last night.
That'll be nice, Gift,
she said.
You know, I've been thinking last night, after I berated Cyril for his irrelevant suspicions.
What?
If you do find out that I'm really different, and that there's something off about me, will you still like me?
Of course I will, he said, smiling. I mean, you love the music I play for you. What makes you say that? I already told you. You don't have to be ashamed of being different.
That's all I wanted to hear from you until the opportune moment, she said. I'll be there at that party, Gift. I don't want to spend all night in your cabin with your cat.
You won't. Just make sure you give him food and water before you go.
Thank you. And don't worry about last night. The incident is past now.
She kissed him on the cheek before heading inside. He can't help but smile to himself, saying, It's really amazing the things we can do together. But as soon as Kitty feeds Aloysius in Gift's cabin, she can hear the cat say, It won't be long now, Kitty. Pretty soon you can sense them coming. When they do, they won't rest until they have what they want, and half of these men dead. Not every sailor survives the sea's wrath. She sighed, whispering,
Then may God help them.
Later in the afternoon, Larry makes his way back to the wireless room so he can call the mainland with an egg sandwich on his plate. There, he can see Kozlov at the starboard side of the bridge, smoking his pipe. Another perfect day out at sea, isn't it, comrade? He asked. I don't know if it's going to be perfect or not, Larry said. I want a confirmation back at the mainland. You could scarcely ask them for a smoother sea. Then Larry heads up to the upper bridge. Switching on the generator in the wireless room, while taking a bite of a sandwich, he sat down and puts his headphones on. He taps CGKS. This is KMHE. Requesting weather report. Then he listens. KMHE. This is CGKS. Weather is clear, but temperature slightly dropped to 67 since Friday. When shall you return? He replied, We shall return to harbor on Wednesday morning. Alert Morimo for dock workers to haul out our load in crates. Also requesting crane with lifting straps upon return. Are you doing well? Yes, we are fine. And the crew? Nervously, he replied, Yes, Captain is doing fine as well. Even Kitty. He was shocked by the sudden reply from the CGKS. Even Kitty? As he recalled, they haven't even heard of her before. Before he can reply, the CGKS replied, We are coming to get you. Hearing the reply, he can't help but tap back, What are you saying? However, the CGKS replied, Tell your captain we are coming to get you. Quickly and hesitantly, he wrote the message down before ripping off his headphones and rushes out. Soon enough, he quickly knocked on the door to Fred's cabin before bursting in. What is it? Fred asked. CGKS just called, Larry said. What did they say? Ask me about the weather. They say there's going to be clear skies and calm waters even though the temperature dropped a couple degrees since Friday, but that's not all they say. Fred leaned closer, sneering. What else did they say? Larry thrust the paper into his hand. We are coming to get you. Reading the wireless, Fred became disgusted. They're what? Also, they asked if we're doing fine out at sea, even Kitty, which I do not understand, Larry said. They never even heard of her before. Fred crumpled up the wireless and glared at him. Coming to get me, will they? Oh, I know what to say, all right. He stormed out, with Larry following him. Fred! He shouted. Don't waste your time! I don't even think it sounds like the CGKS. But already, Fred came into the wireless room, where he fiercely keys a rebuke. CGKS. This is KMHE. What is the meaning of this wireless? He puts on his headphones and listens for a reply. Sure enough, the CGKS replied, KMHE. This is CGKS. What wireless? He cannot believe what he's hearing, making him more frustrated, thinking to himself, What are you, deaf as well as retarded? He quickly taps. You send me a wireless. You told me that you are coming to get me. Please explain. The CGKS replied a few minutes later. We confirm that no such wireless has been sent to you. Larry entered the room and switches off the generator to the Marconi transmitter. What did I tell you, Fred? He asked. I don't think it sounds like a CGKS. Fred shook his head. Well, I don't believe them. Lying to me, saying that they gave me no such wireless. The first thing I'll do when we head back to Morimo is to find the turd who sent me that and string him up by his toenails. Larry sighed. I'm sure that you're making a mistake. Don't go attacking the CGKS. They've been serving sailors from Mormo like us for 140 years. I don't even think no one has ever sent them such a wires before. Fred rose up and glared at him. The only mistake they made is that they had to screw around with the wrong seaman. Fred! Larry barked. But Fred already stormed out without a word and slammed the door shut. Frustrated, Larry turns the generator back on and taps on the transmitter. CGKS. This is KMHE. Please forgive Captain for acting this way. It will not happen again. However, the CGKS replied, KMHE. This is CGKS. I bet he is sorry, but not as sorry as he is going to be tonight. I will make sure of that. We all will. Consumed with a novel fear for the captain's life, he swallowed hard and switches off the generator. That doesn't even sound like the CGKS. Oh, how right he's going to be by tonight. As the sky brings forth the night, the Maybelle was enlivened with a whirl of excitement. Music drifted out over the North Sea with Giff and a small set of sailors. Along with Giff Steinway, there was Isaac Gardner's banjo, Leonard Sutton's clarinet, Jamie Chapman's fiddle, and Chester Evans' trumpet. Right now, they're playing the appropriate "Strike Up the Band, Here Comes a Sailor." Kitty stepped out of Giff's cabin and stared out from the bulwark. Everywhere, there was laughter and the clinking of bottles. And of course, there was the occasional "Slacha," uttered from one of the sailors who were Irish. Fred had brought out bottles of Guinness and whiskey, and were passing them around. But the booze didn't interest her. It was the music that drew her. A smile immediately blossomed on her face. Fred saw her at the bulwark and called out, "Come on down, Kitty!" Immediately she heads down on deck, already feeling the rush of giddiness. He asked her, "You had an experience with dancing before, have you not?"
Back where I'm from, there have been waltzes and quadrilles and polonaises, but I've never had any experience with the dances your people do, she said.
He can't help but laugh. "Oh, girl, let me give you a piece of advice. You stick with the times and it'll make your life easier before you know it."
Can't say I've stick with the times, Fred,
she stated. He sighed and crossed his arms. "Figures. Well, it seems now is the right time to learn something new, doesn't it?" It didn't take long for her to try something new, like the hornpipe, a dance associated with sailors. With help from him, she did it very well. "Well, quite a fast learner you are," he said. "I can see that right away. Quick and responsive with instructions you are. I can see that you'll fit in wherever you go." As soon as Strike Up the Band finishes, Giff calls out to her, "Come here, I want to show you something." She heads over and looked at the front of the music rack on the Steinway. It was the music sheet for Meow by Mel B. Kaufman.
"You're playing it for me?"
she exclaimed. "Hope you get comfortable, Kitty," he stated. "We're going to be here all night." Then he begins playing the tune with the crew joining in. There's so much joy in her that she begins doing the hornpipe. All around her, the crew clapped to the beat. She purred to hear such music and to see the pleasure in the eyes of her new friends. As soon as Meow finished, Giff calls out to Otis to take over. "After you've gone," he requested. Sitting on a stool, Otis placed his daguerreotype next to the music sheet. "I'm too old to be cavorting around on deck," he stated. "Don't forget, Otis, always think of your loved ones back home," Giff said. "Wouldn't it be great if they happened to be at the docks when we return? It'll be like Christmas coming early, or a soldier returning from fighting in a war." I know, Otis smiled. I'll be back home to them soon. As soon as the crew began playing After You've Gone, Giff walked over to Kitty and Fred. May I have this dance, Kitty? He asked.
What?
She asked.
You like to do the hornpipe too?
I actually prefer a waltz. Fred smirked. I'll leave it with you, Mr. Rogers. I swear you're meant for one another, I'm glad to say. As soon as he leaves, Kitty takes Giff by the hand.
I would like a waltz,
she said.
Thank you.
Soon enough, they twirled to After You've Gone. To her, she knew that it was better than dancing the hornpipe. To him, despite the color of her hair, he knew that he was dancing with a beautiful girl, like the belle of a ball.
Don't you think it's magnificent, Giff?
She asked. Let me tell you, he said. I've met many girls in Kerrigan, but one of them is barely like you. Very hardly.
It's because of the hair, isn't it?
I take that back. None of them are like you. Chances are, none has hair so pink like you. Let's stop dancing for a bit. I have something to show you. He leads her to the railing before taking out his leather wallet from his pocket and pulls out a photograph inside, giving it to her. The photo was a girl of about Giff's age, with brown hair tied into 2 braids and blue eyes. This here's Monica Beaumont, he said. In Kerrigan, she studied English literature and often came home by herself on the train on weekends. She really is something, is she? He pulls out another photo from his wallet and gives it to her. It was a photo of a blonde-haired girl dressed in an outstanding college uniform, carrying a tennis racket on her shoulder. That's Rosie Clark, he said. Met her at my tennis class I did. Really is a pity to see her upset when I quit, but we're always in touch. He pulls out a third photo from his wallet and gives it to her. It was a photo of a girl with long black hair and blue eyes behind her brown glasses. She was wearing a beige turtleneck sweater and matching skirt. That's Maud Costello, he said. I met her at music class during the fall semester last year. Her instrument was the flute. After school, I would help with study so she can get a better grade.
They're very beautiful,
she said. Only one thing stands out, Kitty, he said. They don't have pink hair. I especially love them as a person. She handed the photos back to him, who then placed them in his wallet.
You know,
she said,
aside my flaws, it was awfully lucky for me that we met.
You know what they say, he said. There's so much wonder in this world. For a person this impressionable, with a voice destined to be heard, he could always have his head up in the clouds and try not to look down.
Then allow me to say this. My time will come. One day, everything will be different. Nothing will be the same again. I know that this world is not yet ready for all the things I can do. I will be welcomed. It is my destiny.
Then she saw Giff smirk dangerously. You know, I'm really looking forward to go back to Kerrigan this fall and tell those girls about you if I see them around. I bet they'd be really envious. I bet they'd turn green.
But would that hurt their feelings?
What can I say? As long as I think of you this summer, it's really amazing the things we can do together. She lowered her head.
Shall we continue to dance?
All right, he said. As long as my cat has some food and water, we'll be here on deck all night. No different from the others on board this ship. Just then, they hear Fred ring out. Come on, boys! The night's still young for the Irish. Nothing like a little dancing to get your spirits up and your blood pumping. There's always tomorrow, after all. Another day to fish, I tell you. And another number rang out, wild and rollicking, accompanied with the fiddle, the accordion, and the bagpipes. Giff noticed Kitty's hands trembling when she saw people grab hands and dance in a line all around the deck. He assures her, just move around with me, and don't think. Nodding understandably, she lets Larry grab her hand, and soon they were all laughing and dancing all around the deck. Some of the sailors, including Fred, can only clap harder and harder to the beat, as the band played faster and faster. With so much excitement, Kitty's concern about what's happening all around her is immediately at ease. At that instant, Clouds began to gather toward the Maybelle and darken the sky further. Lightning began bathing the ship in a harsh light, forcing the crew to stop playing and dancing, and Kitty and Giff to look ahead. Up in the crow's nest, Oliver rang the bell 3 times, a clear sign of the coming danger. His brother Nicholas shouted, "Hurricane a-coming! Hurricane a-coming!" As the sea started to swell, the boat rocked, and whipping winds sent the sails straining. Fred quickly turned to his crew. "Everybody inside and get your life jackets on! Move, quickly! And put on some raincoats! Secure the fish in the hold and the cargo!" Then the rain fell down hard, and the winds increased, just as the crew leaped into action. "Come on, Kitty!" Giff cried. "We have to get to my cabin!" But she didn't listen. When he hears the lightning strike, he abandons her and heads inside. Fred ordered Kozlov and Otis, barking over the strong wind. "You two, to the wheelhouse! Hurry!" He ordered Larry. "Contact CGKS in case the situation got serious. Tell them where we are!" "Fred!" Larry screamed. "I thought we were having clear skies and calm waters. That's what the CGKS said. But I don't even think it sounds like them, does it?" "Get moving!" Fred shouted. As soon as Larry bolted, Fred saw Kitty remaining on deck, staring out at the sea. Rain continues to pour hard onto the ship, and a huge wave rose over it, crashing to the side, lurching violently to starboard. The sudden lurch almost knocked the Bell brothers off the crow's nest. They managed to hold on. Fred was almost thrown back onto the deck and managed to hold on, but she remained standing still, staring out into the sea. "Get down below!" Fred screamed, as the Bell brothers carefully walked down the ladder and made their way to the forecastle. "You want to get thrown overboard?" But she kept staring ahead. "What are you looking at?" he shouted. "There's nothing out there but angry waves!" But before they knew it, a swarm of giant stormfish, about 20 to 30 meters in length, swam towards them. Clearly, they're coming to get Fred. "Would you look at the size of them?" he cried. "I don't think this ship is big enough to catch every one of them."
"There won't be another catch,"
she said sternly.
"It turns out you have something that belongs to them."
"What are you talking about?"
"Nothing will stop them from getting what they want."
There was a brief delay in his mind, and then he felt his jaw dropping, forming a horrible realization. "You mean that stonefish we caught was a baby?"
"Can you guess which one's the mother or the father?"
she snapped.
"You'll have to find out on your own. They're coming to get you."
That's when he realized that the threatening message wasn't from the CGKS at all. Before he grabs her, another lurch knocks him off as the wind tears off the ship's sails. The Bell brothers were washed overboard, along with wooden deck chairs. In the wireless room, Larry swung the Marconi to life and begins to key frantically. "CGKS! This is KMHE! SOS! SOS! We are taking on water! SOS!" He hears the CGKS reply, "KMHE! This is CGKS. What is happening?" In the event of a disaster near or outside the city limits like this unexpected storm, the Coast Guard Cardono station immediately respond to any sort of distress coming from the sea. Larry frantically typed, "We are caught in terrible..." The giant stormfish smashes against the side of the ship, throwing everyone off balance. When the fish hits, its gelatinous body full of water explodes as if it was a water balloon, but with enough force to push. Larry gets up onto his feet, and to his shock, the Marconi transmitter no longer works. That's because the antenna wires snap, cutting communication off by the stormfish's bombardment. Not knowing what to do, he puts on his life jacket and his raincoat. Inside the wheelhouse, Otis is on the wheel, turning the ship to starboard, as Kozlov signals the engine to full ahead. Otis lets go of the wheel. "Mr. McGinty," Kozlov said, "get back on the wheel. You have to get us out of the storm." "She can hold back for a while," Otis said. "I'm just going to pack my things, in case we're going to sink. I won't be long." Then, Another slam from the stormfish on the port side has Otis flying across and slams his head onto the bronze Chatburn. Then he crumples onto the floor and became still. Kozlov got up to his feet, but he looks down at Otis in horror. Otis just lay there, not moving and not breathing. Then, signaling the engines to all stop, he turned away, staggering out of the wheelhouse. But this doesn't change the fact that Otis is no longer alive. Kozlov calls out from the bulwark.
I don't think this ship can take another beating, comrade. We must abandon ship. You set up starboard side, I'll do port.
Fred turned to Kitty.
Do something while I prepare the lifeboats.
She knew what she had to do. As he carefully makes his way to the stern, she leaps down and into the fishing hold, where the stormfish was stored. Holding up the enormous animal with ease, she leaps up onto the deck and faces the others.
My name is Princess Kitty of KAWAII Wonderland, she shouts. I bring you the offspring in exchange for sparing the lives of the fishermen who hold them captive.
But the giant stormfish keeps ramming onto the Maybelle, bodies exploding into waves.
Be lenient!
She screamed, and hurls the infant into the sea. However, it proved to be useless. Desperate, she heads up to Gift's cabin. As she stormed inside, she can see that he's already wearing his life jacket and raincoat, packing up his briefcase full of music sheets and getting a frightened Aloysius inside his carrier. They knew that the ship won't last much longer.
Here, take the carrier, he said. We have to get moving. We have to get to the lifeboats.
She picks it up and said,
I know. The stormfish isn't going to stop bombarding until the whole ship's underwater. I meant every word I've said about them earlier.
But did you toss the fish back into the sea?
Fred should have tossed it back when he had the chance. The stormfish gave him a chance to give up that fish. He's preparing the lifeboats on the starboard side. Round up every seaman you can find and bring them to the stern.
I'll get them to a boat, but you have to help me get them off. When you're at the stern, take the carrier to Fred. I'll pick him up when I get to a lifeboat. Now go!
She frantically heads to the stern. She can see the lifeboat swung out. However, Fred was nowhere to be seen. Just then, she can hear someone calling for help. Staring ahead, she can see him in the water as he sank beneath the waves. He emerged again, spluttering and gasping, but it was clear that he was going to drown. Then she can hear Aloysius from inside the carrier.
Hurry, Kitty! Get me into the boat!
She boards it with the carrier. Placing it down, she hears him say,
Open the door!
She did so. The cat got out and looked up at her. Go out there and save the captain. There's no time.
What about your owner? She asked. He wanted me to help the people get on deck. Get to the lifeboat.
Aloysius shook his head. I've told you before. Not every seaman can survive the sea's wrath. Those stormfish, Kitty, they are the sea. Go now and close it! As soon as he gets back inside the carrier, she closed it before she jumps off the lifeboat and dove into the water, swimming towards Fred. Fred begins to sink, exhausted, but she wraps him from behind.
I got you, Fred,
she said. He turned to her.
You got me? Who's got you? You have no life jacket!
At that moment, Giff came back with Hector, Isaac, Bugsy, Larry, and Irving. They were scrambling towards the lifeboat, but Kitty is nowhere near it. Giff can only see his cat carrier placed on board, and hearing Aloysius crying out.
Oh God, where's Kitty? Giff demanded. She has no life jacket on!
Larry pointed ahead.
There! I see her! And she's got the captain!
Staring ahead, Giff can see Kitty holding on to Fred.
Then we have no time to lose,
Giff said, already jumping onto the boat and picking up the carrier, holding onto it.
We have to get into the boat right now. We have to save them at once. What about Kozlov?
Isaac said.
We can't leave him! He should have loaded the other sailors on the port side by now,
Giff said.
He'll be all right. Someone cast off!
Bugsy stepped into the lifeboat, followed by Hector, Isaac, Larry, and Irving.
I'll take the tiller,
Bugsy said. Larry calls out.
Kitty! Keep kicking! We're coming to get you!
he and Isaac began slowly lowering the boat. However, when Giff stares ahead, he can see that she had large triangular white ears and a cat-like face. It must have been a trick with a storm, an illusion, but no, that was the real deal. That's when he figures out the truth. What Fred told the crew yesterday about her was right. And after so many days at sea, he can't ever believe it. Probably the crew can see it too. Then again, maybe not. Bugsy was at the tiller. Larry and Isaac were lowering the boat. Irving and Hector sat by the front and picking up the oars, ready to row away from the Maybelle. But he knew he had to do something. He couldn't just say nothing. He had to tell someone. Someone! As soon as the boat reached the water, as soon as Larry and Isaac released the boat and began picking up the oars and row away, at the same moment, a colossal stormfish shot out of the sea, its entire body clearing the surface to come crashing onto the bow of the Maybelle, bursting into gallons of water. Everything that wasn't bolted down gets washed away, including Giff's 1903 Steinway. The weight of the water, the incredible weight, began pulling the ship down by the bow. Larry dared to look back and scream, "Oh, Christ!" Giff ordered. "Don't look back! Keep rowing! Keep rowing! It'll drag us under if we don't! Quickly!" However, Larry was still panicking as the lifeboat rose away, constantly screaming over and over underneath a perspiration of fear. "Oh, Christ! Oh, Christ!" "Shut up and keep rowing!" Giff shouted. Isaac calls out to the two people who are still in the water. "Don't worry about the ship! She's already lost! We're coming to get you as quickly as we can! Swim, you two! Swim!" Out there, Fred and Kitty can see the Maybelle sinking by the stern. The lights went out, leaving a faint silhouette of her former self before it slides into the waves. All that's left were the lifeboats and several flotsam. They can hear Isaac shouting, "We're coming to get you, Fred! Hang on! Do not give up!" Fred grabbed her tight and said, "Come on! Swim to the boat! Kick your feet!" She shoved him off and dived into the water. "Kitty!" he shouted. "What are you doing?" However, the boat reached him, and Hector and Isaac pulled him up and hauled him aboard. Fred pushed them off and looks down over to the side, but she was nowhere to be found. After all, this is pretty much his fault. If only he had ever listened to her. Isaac takes off his raincoat and said to Fred, "Put this on and grab an oar. I'll get you some medicinal brandy." All around Fred, the men were shivering from the pouring rain and terrified of what they've witnessed. Then, out there where the ship once stood, they can see a flare whizzing up into the sky and explodes, briefly bathing another lifeboat in the water. "It's Kozlov!" Isaac said. "He made it! Oh, thank God! Giff, you're right! You are right!" However, Fred remained shivering, numb and disbelieving, staring at the side. That's when Giff begins to panic. "Wait a minute!" he shouted. "Kitty! Where is she?" Fred remained silent, but that made no difference to Giff. Giff knew that she's still in the water. Fear lingered inside of him. The fact that this girl who was half cat after such a brief revelation is too much for him. Frantically, he rose up and begins tearing off his raincoat and his life jacket, but Bugsy drags him down. "What do you think you're doing?" Bugsy demanded. "Let me go!" Giff shouted. "I gotta get to Kitty! She's still out there!" He fights Bugsy as hard as he can to get back into the water, but Bugsy drags him back. "Like hell, college boy!" he yelled. "There's nothing you could do for her now. She may be lost at sea." "No!" Giff screamed, struggling in Bugsy's grip. "You stay calm and shut up, or I'll shut you up myself!" Bugsy barked. "Now don't be an idiot and sit back down!" Isaac rose up and pulled Giff away from Bugsy. Then he slugs Bugsy, knocking him next to the tiller, shouting, "You keep your hands off of him, unless you want me to toss you off myself. Now keep order! Can't you bloody see?" But then, he noticed the water far from the lifeboat begins to churn. The crew fear that another stormfish is about to finish them off, as well as Kozlov's lifeboat. However, that didn't happen. Instead, with a great whoosh,
the Maybelle bursts out of the surface. Cascades of water pour out from her body, even through the portholes. Looking close, Fred can see a small body coming out, holding the entire ship by the bow. Once it's free of water, she carefully lets it down with a splash. Fred stares in wonder, but is saddened by his arrogance. Bugsy's eyes widen in disbelief. "What just happened?" "Never mind that," Fred said. "Head to the ship! Move!" They quickly rowed towards the hull of the ship. Up close, the crew can see a rope ladder that was attached to the starboard side. Pulling it to make sure it's sturdy, Fred ordered Hector, Bugsy, and Isaac. "You row to the davits and attach to the boat. The rest will board the ship and alert Kozlov to come back." Using the rope ladder, Fred, Giff, Larry, and Irving climb up and onto the damp deck, while Hector, Bugsy, and Isaac row towards the stern. The storm had finally subsided, but the raining didn't. However, it's raining lightly. Looking around, Fred stared forlornly at the damage done by the stormfish. It was the most grim scene he had ever been witness to. The hatches were blown out, all the fish stored in the hold gone. To Giff, his 1903 Steinway was gone, though he was barely upset at the loss. All communications between the ship and Moimo Harbor cut off. Back home, they didn't know if they're dead or alive. Unless the city sends in a search party, they're on their own, adrift on board a washed-up ship. "God, what a fool I've been," Fred said, his voice brittle and on edge. Larry rushes over to the side and retched. He tasted sour bile and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "You know what's ironic, Captain?" he asked. "In the Marconi room, you once asked me what's out there to prevent you from fishing. What does that tell you now?" "I must say something to you now, which is the nightmare of every master and which, in 30 years of service at Moimo, I never expected to have to say," Fred said. "Thanks to my arrogance, we're abandoning our expedition. We'll try to find a way back home. We're still in the North Sea, but I don't think we'll get home sooner." Larry was still shaken with nausea, but manages to regain his composure. Giff said, "Don't get so hard on yourself, Captain. We're with you. We will try to get home ourselves." Fred said, "But look inside the hold. There's no fish. And I expect all our food and drinks are lost at sea, too. We might as well give up. All hope is lost now. We have to try anyway. You say the word, Captain. We're with you, no matter what. We never want to be loyal to any captain but you." He makes his way to the stern, but he froze. He saw Kitty standing behind the bulwark, her yellow cap washed away, leaving her cat ears exposed for him to see. "Captain!" he calls out to Fred, pointing at Kitty behind the bulwark. "I found her! You were right about this Felinas girl yesterday. She's half cat!" That's when Fred's heart seized up and stared at her. It didn't take long for Larry and Irving to stare at her, too. "Dear God," Larry said. "What kind of specimen is she? Forget the stormfish. This girl!" However, he has no more words coming out of him. Giff only made several steps toward the bulwark. He didn't speak, but his eyes were suddenly big with tears. For a moment, he did not move any closer to the bulwark. Fred makes his way to the bulwark, but stopped when he hears her saying to him in a low tone,
"Now these people know who I really am, don't they?"
Giff finally found the voice and called out, his face cold and wet. "Kitty, I don't care what—"
"Not another word from all four of you,"
she said fiercely.
"Do you hear me? I want you to get the rest of the crew back on board. It's time to let them know."
He stepped back in shock. The tears finally came down on him. "Come on," Fred said. "Get to the stern, quickly. Giff and Larry, you take starboard." Without staring at her, they ran to the stern, managing to raise the lifeboats back onto the deck. On the port side, Fred and Irving raised Kozlov's boat. He, Cyril, the shivering Bell brothers, and a group of sailors immediately head out of the boat and onto the deck. "I mislike the feel of these seas, comrade. A really harsh and jealous sovereign, demanding of man's respect, and vengeful against his arrogance," Kozlov stated. I came here willingly to fish for profit nonetheless. Believe me, Mr. Kozlov, Fred said grimly. I've learned it the hard way. Duh, I wasn't expecting this. 12 years I've been working at sea, and not an astonishing thing happened until tonight. Oliver nodded and spoke dryly. A terrible place for men to die. Then he coughed. We'll get you some brandy in no time, and we'll get you out of those wet clothes, Kozlov said. Your brother, too. Nick said weakly to Fred. We were thrown off the ship. We managed to hold on to the deck chairs, use them as life preservers before the lifeboat came. Fred can hear Cyril speak up. I fear there'll be bodies floating all over the sea tonight. Corpses around our area. The thought already terrified Fred, but he refused to let it show. Oliver said, Just think, some of the crew like us are Irish on board the ship. May the lost find eternal peace in the land of Ten and Og. How many are still alive, Capitaine? Cyril asked. We'll find out soon after a complete roll call, Fred stated. There are 35 men at the start of the expedition. For the dead, we'll have to bring them up here by morning. Bring them to the forecastle in canvas bags. The forecastle will be off limits to sailors. Those who survive will sleep in the center of it. They'll be given some medicinal brandy to prevent hypothermia, and their wet clothes removed and hung to dry in the morning. Do you understand all this, Mr. Lefebvre? Chester Evans calls out. What about the food and the non-essentials? There must be something we can eat until a search party is dispatched. Fred shook his head. I don't think most of them will be salvaged. Not even the salt, the spices, the bread, the coffee, and the tea, and the tobacco. So that's that, Cyril cried, his grief too difficult to suppress. So that's that, Cyril cried, his grief too difficult to suppress. Un black cruel! I can smell eventual death all around us. Who cares if we got our ship back by some force? Who cares if we're safe? We're going to die out in the North Sea anyway. Death from thirst and hunger and exposure alone. We can survive only 3 days without water. We can't drink the water from the sea or it'll make us sick. We can survive only a month without food, but I don't think we'll even survive a week. There's no communication between here and the mainland before the storm ceased. Rest assured that we'll find something to eat, and it'll be rationed before help can arrive, Fred stated. I've made a terrible mistake just days ago, and tonight I've paid the price. I almost got you killed because of me. I'll do anything to make things right. Anything. And what about the ship that's suddenly been raised from the sea? Kozlov demanded. How is that even possible? Does that mean we're now forced to question the natural order of things for the rest of our lives? Fred finally loses his cool. He can barely speak, but he manages to spat out these words. It was that girl, Kozlov asked. Miss Velinas? Yes! The girl I've brought into this expedition. She warned me to let that fish go, but I didn't. If I should have listened to her the first time, then all my crew would have still been alive. Even Mr. McGinty? Fred was scandalized at those few words in denial. In the midst of the chaos and the disaster they left, he forgot about Otis. The last time he saw the old man was when he heads to the wheelhouse after he and Kozlov were ordered to be there. I saw what happened to him during the storm, comrade, Kozlov went on. He fell and hit his head against a chadburn. Man so old. He sadly died, probably from hemorrhaging in the brain. His body is still in the bridge. Fred lowers his head and clenches his fist, but he's too numb to be angry or to cry. After all, it really was his fault. He only wanted to see his wife and daughter again, Mr. Kozlov, he said. He wanted to retire. Kozlov shook his head. Too bad this isn't exactly what he had in mind now, does it? You didn't kill him. He'll have to join the rest of the dead. Fred turned to see Kitty coming towards the group. He points at her and said, Here she comes! Maybe she'll tell you who she really is herself! Kozlov, Cyril, and the sailors were shocked when they saw her. However, Cyril knew that he was right about that girl the entire expedition, starting with those claw marks on Fred's arm. He turned to Fred and cried, I knew it! I knew that I was right all along about that girl you've brought to this boat! She snarled angrily at Cyril's face, making him back away in fear.
I just saved you and most of the crew from death, she hissed. And this is how you thank me? By continuing to not trust me? Just because I'm not entirely human?
She pulls out her scepter and points it at his neck.
My friend was right about one thing about me. I don't have to be ashamed of being different. Those who think I should!
Fred moved in. That's because nobody in the city ever saw a creature like you before. People are concerned by what they don't understand, by what they don't believe in. She slowly lowers her scepter, leaving Cyril collapsed to his knees. Kozlov walks to her and touches her skin. He was shocked that while everyone has been doused constantly with either rain or seawater, she remained dry, as if water had no effect on her.
Well, that's too bad,
she said.
Because I got nowhere else to go. Nowhere but this world. I will not abandon my destiny, and I forbid myself to do so. As long as there's good in this world, even though the world isn't always perfect, I deserve to exist. I want them all to depend on me if they want to get home. Is everyone that has survived back on deck?
They should have by now, while you were speaking, Fred said.
If that is the case, I'm ready to tell them all who I am. They'll have to see reason.
She tears off her soaked brown shirt, exposing her cardinal-colored strapless leotard.
I left my clothes in Gift's cabin. I'll put them on later.
She makes her way to the bulwark. On deck, only 18 of the crew has survived the confrontation with the stormfish, including Gift Rogers, Benjamin Curtis, Lawrence Barnes, Isaac Gardner, and Hector Marin. Fred, Oliver, Nick, Irving, Kozlov, Cyril, and a group of soldiers join them, just in time for the survivors to stare at her behind the bulwark. Obviously, they look at her with great nervousness.
You are all lucky to survive, unlike those who are lost, she stated. However, such dangerous forces have prevented you from going home. So if you all wish to go home, then from now on, the only person you can count on is me. Don't even lose your will to live.
Even Bugsy swallowed hard.
Besides, do you all have loved ones back home?
She demanded.
If all hope is lost, just imagine what they would say if they think you are dead out there at sea.
My family, Gift spoke up. I wouldn't want them to know that I'm lost at sea.
And what about you?
She asked Hector. My family's back in the country I come from, he confessed. If they know about my loss, their hearts will be broken for sure.
And what about you two?
She asked Bugsy and Larry. My wife and my little girl, Bugsy said, with a tear in his eye. I don't want them distraught about my disappearance. My in-laws were in Moimo Harbor, Larry said. They work at the docks too.
And what about you, Fred?
She demanded.
With you gone, what will become of your fishing business?
I'd rather be stripped naked and be flagellated than to have that spineless cockroach Donovan tear down my business, he shouted.
Exactly! But that's not important now. Are there any cargo still on board? She asked.
I know for a fact that some of the inventory are now ruined, including the tobacco, some of the food, and the spices, Larry stated. If there are nets, we'll use them to catch fish. Of course, that means what's left of the food will be rationed until help arrives. She nodded.
Why don't we retire and go to sleep? We only have 4 days left before we head back to Kadono.
How? Isaac asked. She pulls out her scepter.
I shall give you blankets and pillows and make your rooms free of water, she said.
What about the electricity in the boilers? Irving asked. We need heat and electricity to survive.
Too bad I'm not familiar with those things, she said. Be gay that you get to live to see the morning. However, not every sailor survives the wrath of the sea like tonight.
Then she raised her scepter up in the air. The top glows for a bit before dimming.
Now that you know who I really am, I realize many of you are quite possibly scared, shocked, and maybe a little confused as to why I'm actually a creature from another world. A creature that isn't mostly human, she said. Well, what I can tell you all now is that you don't have to be afraid of me. I have taken the additional steps necessary to ensure my existence in this world, for it is my destiny to be welcomed here. As the royal princess of KAWAII Wonderland, the kingdom I once called home, rest assured that such impudence shall never again be necessary between us. You will no longer call me Kitty Felinis. You will call me by my given name, my true name, Princess Kitty. I'm born brilliant, born royal, and a lot clever. I will not fail you, as long as you do as I say, or you could all forget about going home, because I'm your only hope. The choice is yours. Make it wisely.
She turned and made her way to Gif's cabin. Carrying Aloysius, Isaac gives the carrier back to Gif. Fred puts his hand on Gif's shoulder in a hard grip. He whispered briefly, I want you to stay with her. Now that you know her true self, you must accept her for what she is. Continue loving her as a friend. That's exactly what I'm going to do, Gif said. As soon as Gif walks away with the cat, Fred turns to the crew. By the dawn's early light, in groups of 6, I want you to recover the bodies from the sea and be placed in the forecastle and canvas bags. The rest will try to salvage what we have left, in order to survive. Gif enters his cabin with his cat, only to find Princess Kitty already tore off her wet clothes and placed her skirt and crown on. The room was only alight with a kerosene lantern.
Don't mind me,
she said.
I was just leaving.
What? He asked.
I'll sleep with the captain until help arrives. Now that you know who I am, there's no purpose in staying with people like you.
No, Kitty, he said, putting down the carrier and opening the door to let Aloysius out. There is. Fred wanted me to stay with you. He wanted me to accept you for what you are.
Did Fred really say that? He's a stupid fool to say such things. Who would want to be with a girl who's half cat after knowing the truth?
He leaned closer and grabbed her hands. I would, he said. I don't care what you really are, Kitty. I don't even care if you're not entirely human. I only care for you as a person, not because of what you might do to get us back home, but because of who you are and what you've meant. I don't know why you thought I could just leave you after I find out. I hope it makes you feel better now. As long as you're my friend, that will never change.
I don't know, Gif,
she said.
Are you sure of that?
As tears continued to stream down, he embraced her, assuring, as long as you do something good to us in order to survive. I never knew such a girl like you exists. You will help us, won't you? I got my whole life ahead of me, a future. I don't want my parents to find me in an obituary.
I do find your words sincere,
she said.
I will do what I can, even though I'm not of this world.
Then she felt the tears streaming down her whiskers.